Hi, I'm Chris Green, the History Chap, telling the forgotten stories from British history. D-Day, June the 6th, 1944, over 150,000 Allied troops landed in Normandy, including 60,000 British. And yet, amidst the chaos, carnage and courage, just one man was awarded the Victoria Cross. His name? Stan Hollis, a no-nonsense Yorkshireman from the Green Howards, who in the space of a single day carried out two astonishing acts of bravery, charging enemy positions, rescuing his men, and saving the lives of countless comrades. This is the story of D-Day's only VC recipient, a tough Yorkshireman who embodied the quiet courage of Britain's greatest generation. Stanley Elton Hollis was born on the 21st of September 1912 in Middlesbrough, North Yorkshire, the son of Alfred and Edith. He was baptised in the Church of St Paul in the town 3 weeks later. Middlesbrough, situated on the southern bank of the River Tees, was dominated by its huge iron and steel works. In fact, his father worked in that hard industry. After the First World War, the family moved to Robin Hood's Bay on the Yorkshire coast, where his father opened a fish and chip shop. But a while later, they moved back to Alfred's hometown of Middlesbrough. Upon leaving school, Stan decided to broaden his horizons and joined the Merchant Navy. However, his career with the Elder Dempster Line was short-lived. During one of several trips to West Africa, Stan contracted blackwater fever, a severe complication of malaria. Returning to Middlesbrough, he became a lorry driver. In January 1933, he married Alice Clixby. They would be married for the next 40 years and would have two children, a boy and a girl, Brian and Pauline. A man looking for some adventure as well as some additional money with that growing family, in 1939 he enlisted in the Territorial Army, joining the local regiment, the Green Howards. The Green Howards were a Yorkshire-based regiment that had been formed way back in 1688. In those days, regiments were named after their commanding officers. It just so happened that by the 1740s, two regiments were commanded by men surnamed Howard, causing just a tad of confusion. As this particular regiment wore green cuffs and facings on their tunics, they were nicknamed the Green Howards, although officially they were the 19th Regiment of Foot. They were, during the 19th century, to earn battle honours in India, the Crimean War, and the Boer War in South Africa, and after the First World War, their nickname finally became their official regimental name. So the Green Howards were a regiment with a long and proud history, to which Stan Hollis would add another heroic chapter. Upon the outbreak of the Second World War, he was called up, moving to the 6th Battalion of the regiment. Standing at 6 foot 2 inches, with rugged looks, huge fists, fiery red hair, and a fiery temper to match, he was certainly a soldier you wanted on your side rather than the enemy's. An independent man, more than once he was given company punishment for going AWOL, absent without leave, to see his family. His punishment, somewhat ironically for a man whose dad owned a fish and chip shop, was peeling potatoes. His wartime service with the Green Howards also acts like a story of the British Army during this conflict. Arriving in France in April 1940 as part of the BEF, he worked as the commanding officer's dispatch rider, despite the fact that he'd never ridden a motorbike in his life. A month later, the phony war ended as the Germans swept into France and the Low Countries, and the BEF were forced back to Dunkirk. It was at Dunkirk, whilst waiting to be evacuated, that a mortar bomb exploded near him, riddling his back with shrapnel. Half naked and wounded, he nevertheless managed to half walk, half swim out to a waiting boat. He was evacuated on the early evening of the 31st of May. Promoted to the rank of sergeant, he then fought with the Green Howards as part of the 50th Northumbrian Division in Montgomery's 8th Army in the North Africa campaign. Participating in the Battle of El Alamein, Hollis and the 6th Battalion Green Howards fought their German and Italian enemies all the way along the coast to Tunis. It was whilst trying to break through the Mareth line in Tunisia that Lieutenant Colonel Derek Seagram of the 7th Battalion would be awarded the first of 3 Victoria Crosses that the regiment would earn during the war. Lieutenant William Weston, serving with the 1st Battalion in Burma, was also awarded Britain's highest medal for valour. And there would be one more, on D-Day 1944, as you're going to find out in a moment. But before that, Hollis, who had been promoted to Company Sergeant Major, along with the 6th and 7th Battalions of the Green Howards, participated in the landings on Sicily in July 1943. 4 days after landing, the Green Howards came up against German paratroopers at the Battle of Primosole Bridge. In 3 days of vicious hand-to-hand fighting, Hollis's company, D Company, were reduced to just 30 men fit for duty. Hollis himself was wounded in the head, which required a metal plate being inserted into his skull. Following a 3-month recuperation, he was back with his regiment. By now, Hollis, who was 31, was seen as an almost fatherly figure to many of the younger soldiers who often looked to him for guidance. The 50th Northumbrian Division, of which the Green Howards were a part, was so highly rated by Montgomery that he requested that they now be transferred back to Britain to spearhead the D-Day landings in Normandy. They travelled in utmost secrecy so as not to alert the Germans, and were even told to remove their distinctive division badge featuring 2-letter T's denoting the rivers Tyne and Tees from their uniforms. So imagine their faces when their ship sailed secretly into Liverpool docks to be greeted by a large homemade banner announcing, "Welcome home, 50th Division." After training in Scotland and on the south coast of England, on the 29th of May 1944, the men of the 6th and 7th Battalions embarked on the landing ship, the SS Empire Lance, ready for Operation Overlord, the Normandy landings. It was one of 5,000 ships that transported troops across the Channel in that largest seaborne invasion in history. On the morning of the 6th of June, the Empire Lance was in position just off Gold Beach. Hollis and his men clambered down into the waiting landing craft alongside them. The sun rose just before 6 a.m. on that historic day, but by then the skyline on the shore was already alight from the naval bombardment which had started about half an hour beforehand. Softening up the defences on Gold Beach were 4 Royal Navy light cruisers and 12 destroyers, along with a gunboat from the Royal Netherlands Navy and a Polish destroyer. Included in their number was the veteran from the Battle of the River Plate, HMS Ajax, and also HMS Orion, whose 13 battle honours during the war was only exceeded in the Royal Navy by one other warship, HMS Warspite. Strong winds had created a swell and had also made the tide higher than anticipated, and as the coxswains steered their landing craft towards the beaches, they had to keep a keen eye for submerged obstacles. Even before they reached the beach, Hollis was in action. Seeing a German bunker on the seawall, he fired at it with a Lewis machine gun, emptying the drum of ammunition. Deciding that he'd get a better shot by putting the gun on the deck of the landing craft, he grabbed the barrel to move it. A big mistake. The hot barrel burnt the skin off his hand, giving him, as he called it, a bloody great blister. Afterwards, he rightly claimed it was the worst wound he'd received during the war. The battalion was one of 2 that were in the first wave of landings at King Sector on Gold Beach at 7:32 that morning. Wading ashore in waist-deep water under a hail of mortar fire, his men of D Company, 6th Battalion, negotiated their way through a minefield and across the beach. CSM Hollis was put in charge of 3 machine gun and 3 mortar teams, whose role was to cover the rest of the company as they moved off the beach towards their main objective, the German heavy artillery battery at Montfleury. As his company moved inland, they reached the village of Vers-sur-Mer about a mile from the beach. Hollis accompanied his company commander to investigate 2 German pillboxes that had been bypassed by the advancing troops. When they were about 20 yards from the pillbox, a machine gun suddenly opened up from inside. The Germans had been waiting quietly, letting the troops pass so they could fire on the unsuspecting British from behind. Hollis rushed forwards, firing his Sten gun from his hip. Reaching the pillbox, he emptied his gun through the firing slit before climbing up on the top. Throwing a grenade through a hatch, he then leapt down, using his considerable frame to shoulder the door open. Entering, he found 2 German soldiers dead and took the 4 remaining dazed and wounded men prisoner. He now made his way along a nearby communication trench that led to a second pillbox about 100 yards or 100 metres away, which he again attacked single-handed. And this time over 24 Germans came out with their hands up. Now, taking 30 prisoners single-handed may very well have merited the Victoria Cross in its own right. But a few hours later, another incredible act of selfless bravery would settle the matter. At around 11 a.m. at the village of Crepon, his company encountered a German position that comprised of a field gun and several MG-42 machine guns, also known as the Spandau. As they took cover, a German sniper spotted Hollis and fired a shot that incredibly just grazed his cheek. Grabbing a Piat, projectile infantry anti-tank, a sort of British version, sort of akin to the bazooka, Hollis ordered 2 Bren gunners to follow him towards a farmhouse to the right of the German position. Moving past the building, they crawled across a rhubarb patch until they were just 50 yards, again about 50 metres, from the field gun. Taking careful aim, he fired the Piat. His shot fell short, and now, alerted to the danger, the field gun was swiftly swung round, and Hollis felt that he was literally staring right down the barrel of the gun. With a deafening roar, it fired on the 3 British soldiers. Luckily for them, the shell flew over their heads, hitting the farmhouse behind them. Deciding that retreat was the best part of valour, he leapt up and shouted to the 2 Bren gunners to leg it back to the cover of the British positions. But having retired to safety, if anywhere can really be called safe on D-Day, he heard the 2 Bren guns still firing from the rhubarb patch. Both men had been wounded and were now pinned down by the Germans. He immediately informed his commanding officer, Major Lofthouse, "I took them in, I'll try to get them out." In full view of the Germans, he ran forward, firing a Bren gun to create a diversion for the 2 men to run for their lives, which, despite their wounds, they did. With the 2 men back at the British lines, Hollis now retraced his steps, firing as he went. Miraculously, despite being in full view of the Germans, he returned unscathed. For this action, along with the single-handed attack on the pillboxes earlier that morning, CSM Stanley Hollis was awarded the Victoria Cross. His citation in the London Gazette on the 17th of August 1944 reads, "Wherever fighting was heaviest, CSM Hollis appeared, and in the course of a magnificent day's work, he displayed the utmost gallantry, and on 2 separate occasions his courage and initiative prevented the enemy from holding up the advance at critical stages. It was largely through his heroism and resource that the company's objectives were gained, and casualties not heavier, and by his own bravery he saved the lives of many of his men." On the 6th of June 1944, over 60,000 British soldiers alone landed on the beaches of Normandy. Stan Hollis was the only one of them to be awarded the VC during that historic and longest of days. By the end of the day, Stan Hollis and the men of the 6th Battalion, Green Howards, were further inland than any other Allied unit. Through the summer, the Allies slowly pushed inland, through the natural defences of the Normandy bocage, before finally trapping and destroying a large number of German troops in the Falaise pocket. Now the way was open for them to push through France, and as the 6th Battalion, Green Howards, advanced into the Low Countries in September, Hollis was wounded in the leg and invalided home. The following month, he received his Victoria Cross from King George VI. But that leg wound, on top of his other injuries, meant it was the end of Stan's war. He returned to Middlesbrough as a hero, but this humble giant shunned the publicity, once slipping out the back door when a journalist appeared at his house. When asked why he behaved so bravely on D-Day, Hollis simply replied, "Because I'm a Green Howard." After the war, he worked in the local steelworks and then became a partner in a motor repair business before spending 5 years as a ship's engineer. Finally, in the late 1950s, he became a publican. He changed the name of his first pub in the Middlesbrough suburb of North Ormsby to the Green Howard. He later moved to the Holywell View pub at Liverton Mines near Loftus. A popular landlord, there were moments where some younger drinkers would have too much, and the hefty landlord with a Victoria Cross, who was now in his 50s, would take them outside. According to his daughter, they always regretted it. Stan Hollis died from a stroke on the 8th of February 1972. He was 59 years old. Maybe those war injuries, which had always given him gyp, and that black water fever from his early career, had finally taken their toll on this humble hero. Stan Hollis VC was laid to rest at Acklam Cemetery in Middlesbrough. Alice, who passed away in 1990, is buried with him. His medal collection, including his Victoria Cross, were auctioned at Sotheby's in 1982, fetching £32,000. They were bought by businessman Sir Ernest Harrison, who some years later presented them to the Green Howards Regimental Museum. You can see Stan Hollis's VC at the museum in Richmond, North Yorkshire. The museum, like a lot of regimental museums, relies on donations to keep going, so if you're ever up in North Yorkshire, please support the museum. And indeed, please support your local regimental museums wherever you are across the UK. Let's keep the memory of those proud regiments and the brave men like Stan Hollis VC alive. However, unlike many VC recipients whose names and deeds have largely been forgotten, Stanley Hollis's name does live on. Hollis Court in Middlesbrough is named after him, and there's a statue to their local hero near the cenotaph in the town. A school in Middlesbrough also bears his name, the Hollis Academy, ensuring that his name lives on with a younger generation too. In so many ways, Stan Hollis was just an ordinary man. But it's often said that sometimes ordinary people do the most extraordinary things. Recalling his wartime service and those brave actions on D-Day, he later told his daughter, "I was no hero. I did what I had to do." And that probably says more than any medal about this man, and indeed, Britain's greatest generation. Stanley Elton Hollis VC, the only man to be awarded the Victoria Cross on D-Day. Well, thanks for joining me today, and I hope you enjoyed that story about a humble British hero. If you'd like to support my channel, then please consider becoming a member, a patron, or just making a one-off donation. There are links below. I'm Chris Green, the History Chap. Thanks for joining me today. Keep well, and I look forward to sharing more stories from British history with you very soon.